12 teams for Escoffier. Quick disclaimer though, Farina is in most of these teams. She's simply the best hydro option for Escoffier. There aren't many content creators considering the fact that not everyone has Farina though, so I'll be dropping an Escoffier video without Farina tomorrow. Subscribe if you're interested. Now let's see what Escoffier's cooked up for us. Starting with a character that doesn't need more teammates whatsoever but seems to get them all the time anyway, let's look at Neuvillette. Prior to 5.1, people running with Farina, Kazuha and Zhongli. Xiaolonen in 5.1 replaced the comfort of Zhongli's shield with healing, big buffs and even more resistance shred. C0 in 5.3 gave us a bit of that interruption to resistance back while still retaining the scroll buff as well as her own resistance shred. Escoffier, rather than replacing the sustain unit, would be another sustain that instead replaces Kazuha. You lose around 40% elemental damage as well as 40% shred from VV and one of the elements for Neuvillette's charge attack buff in his passive. You gain 55% shred to both Hydro and Cryo, another source of big damage, more healing for fanfare stacks as well as the Cryo resonance for crit rate. With all these new characters for Neuvillette, I don't imagine it will be raining in Fontaine anytime soon. Another Fontaine character getting a buff is Rifsley. Hoyo have slowly been letting him out of the Fortress of Meripede. First, he got 2 new teammates in Mawika and Seatlali, then he got a rerun, now he's got another teammate and with it a new team archetype. He's best in melt teams, but with the introduction of Escoffier, Freeze is a strong option for him. It's less restrictive to him that you don't have to worry about elemental application. He is still bound by the unwavering shackles of being French though. Sticking with cryo DPSs, we've got Ayaka flexing those wet grippers. In terms of damage dealing on paper, Ayaka's strongest team is going to be Escoffier, Farina and Shenhe. She's a long forgotten character, but it's nice to see her getting some love. Her story quest and the music in that dancing scene are nostalgic for me. Honestly, I'd say Inazuma's launch was Genshin's peak in terms of hype and player interest. Escoffier gives us a nice throwback to that. I will say though that while this team performs well on paper, people might be overlooking Kazuha's value. Ayaka's burst is going to be dealing a lot of damage, but not if it's not hitting enemies. Kazuha helps a lot with that. Imagine you using this team for the second half of the Abyss. You work through your rotation, pop Ayaka's burst, and whatever it is you're fighting against moves out of it. If you reset the chamber, you have to play the first half again. If she does keep a burst on the enemy, it'll be strong, but bear in mind it might be awkward at times. This next team doesn't really use a typical DPS, I've just always liked Yelan on field, and if you have Favoni's Warbow on her, she'll be generating a lot of particles. Farina gives us HP from the Hydro Resonance as well as buffs and off-field damage. Seatlali brings 4p scroll and 20% hydro shred. Escoffier keeps the entire team alive, shreds resistances by 55%, and the damage is nothing to scoff at. Get it? Despite not having a main DPS, this team still deals a lot of damage because of there being 3 different damage dealers and a bunch of support passives and talents. It felt comfy too. People say Escoffier can't work in melt teams because of her passive, but you know on this channel we're always going to try experimenting anyway. What she loses from her passive she gains back from melt and the ability to hold different weapons. Dragon's Bane gives elemental mastery for a melt damage as well as extra damage against opponents affected by pyro. The battle pass weapon, Ballad of the Fjords, gives elemental mastery and crit rate. I put Bennett in there, then went with Emily for another off-field damage dealer and recorded footage with Arlecchino, Mawika and Dia as the DPSs. Arlecchino was probably the strongest, but she had healing issues. Mawika and Dia both struggled getting their bursts. I like Dia's character though, so I used her footage here. Sticking with a burning team where Escoffier deals off-field melts, we have this. Kaniche, Mawika and Bennett is a solid trio, but people often struggle for the last slot. Emily is ideal, but not everyone pulled her. Farina works too, but she's often taken in other teams. Escoffier is a nice flex option. I tried Yansan in place of Bennett, but I found keeping a Pyro Aura on the enemy more awkward, so I just stuck to the original in the end. Another broken support and another unexpected Nilou buff. I did a video in 5.1 showing how Xiaolonen was the last piece Nilou needed to become a strong DPS. If you haven't seen it, punch yourself in the face. Swapping Kazuha and Xiaolonen out for Seatlali and Escoffier gives the team another damage dealer in Escoffier. She can also heal enough for Nilou to hold Harbinger of Dawn and still be above 90% most of the time. On top of that, it's another team archetype for Nilou. She's got Bloom, which we already know about, Hyper Carry with Kazuha and Xiaolonen, Freeze is a third. I get why you'd sleep on Nilou as a DPS back in 3.1, but not in 5.6. Half of the kit's literally tailor-made with self-infusion for it to be a DPS. If you have Farina, Seatlali and Escoffier, I beg you to give it a go. The reason I play Genshin in the first place is for my first main DPS, Child. Realistically, his only meta team is Child National, but there's so much individual quality in this team that it's going to beat all content in the game. His skill cooldown will always be annoying, but using Chongyun helps to reduce it. You can give him 4-piece Noblesse and Wolf's Gravestone if you have it to give the team a bunch of attack too. Come on, if you're a regular here, you know we're always looking for a way to shoehorn Candice in there, but Escoffier gives Candice some genuine value. We don't have any Hydro Claymores, but with Candice's infusion we do, and Escoffier is going to shred Hydro resistance by 55%. Infusing a physical unit with heavy hitting normal attacks like Eula into Hydro might not be the most meta team, but it'll be fun, and it's a nice way to breathe some new life into some lesser used units. Fremine can be used in the same way too. I like that tank thing he has on his head because it reminds me of Bioshock, so I enjoyed giving him a go. In terms of story, it makes sense to tie water into his kit given the fact he's a diver. I gave him an attack goblet because the physical skill hits aren't converted into Hydro. He has plenty of crit rate from Marishosei and the Cryo Resonance, so I thought I'd use the Melusine Event Claymore on him for a bunch of attack and energy recharge. I know a lot of the fanbase appreciate some Cave content, so you'll be pleased to know he's getting some love. Running him with Escoffier, Farina and Yelan means we have a lot of off-field damage, 2 units in Farina and Yelan, both buffing Cave, plenty of Hydro and Cryo application for Freeze, and then Cave comes in with the heavy hits for Shatter. Obviously, Shatter scales off Elemental Mastery, which just so happens to be what Cave's damage scales off, and Shatter got a small buff in 5.2. Any bloom damage you deal is a bonus here. Not the strongest Escoffier team, but definitely one of Cave's strongest. It might be worth giving him a go in the Abyss if Alhaithim's not busy having a go in his Abyss. Did you know Aloy is my only triple crowned unit? Well, now you know, I'm a big Horizon fan, so I had to show my girl love. Does Escoffier make Aloy great again? Aloy was never great in the first place, at least not in Genshin. She can be used with her though. I've gone with a quick swap team purely because I can't be asked with Aloy's normal attack infusion. We'll just spam it when it's there. I think one thing that kinda gets a little boring with Genshin is when you spend the first part of a rotation setting up, only to switch into your DPS and just spam normals. There's still nuance in how you play some characters, but that's loosely the same approach for most units. After playing other games like Wuthering Waves, it's fun to explore quick swap playstyles, and I think Chongyun is one of our best enablers of that. Aloy has potential to play in the same team playstyle too, given the fact she's a quick swap DPS. Shenhe's press skill shortens a rotation. Escoffier is the last piece of a jigsaw. Is Itto in Escoffier's strongest teams? No. Is she in one of Itto's strongest? Honestly, I'd put this up there with his Mono Geo variants. Pairing him with Farina gives him big value, but finding an optimal healer is an issue. You can run Bennett, but Itto already gets so much attack from his burst. Shalonen means you have to drop the Geo support. Escoffier is a nice option for extra damage and a little bit of Hydro Shred for Farina, although she'll only shred 10% rather than the full 55% from her passive. For a score out of 10, I'd give Escoffier a 9.5. Her healing was so comfy I didn't even need to look at the team's HP. The resistance shred is appreciated too for bringing some less meta characters back into the mix, but her off-field damage is the first we've had so much from a Cryo unit. I was underwhelmed with Cryo going into Natlan, but I feel after Seatlally and Escoffier that's changed a lot. Ironically, I think Natlan did more for Cryo than it did Pyro. I'll be releasing an Ether guide later today, and tomorrow I'm putting out the Escoffier video without Farina that I mentioned earlier. If you're interested in those, subscribe to the channel and take it easy.